the interest of time, everyone has the programs available. We can learn more about our great speakers. We will obey the order in which everything is written and start with Carlos Nader.
Okay. So thank you, Pedro and Bruno, for the invitation. It's really nice to be here, and the snow yesterday and today the sun. This is already a great experience. And then speaking about Coutinho, it's like the whole day is like paradise. So it's really nice to be here. And I also wanted to thank João because the film, the so-called film that we saw only exists because of, well, as every movie of every Coutinho of late movie of the cinema, conversation cinema phase exists because of João. This film also is the same because we met by chance in New York with Sandra about 2 years ago or something, and João was crazy enough to make a proposal that I should work with Coutinho in this film, the one that you saw, the excerpts, and I didn't have the courage to accept, but this was the spark for the interview to happen. It only happened because of that. Then I said, I was like kind of guilty of not accepting because I was feeling kind of a coward in a way because I really couldn't make a film with Coutinho. He was really, but then I said, well, maybe I could, take this invitation from SESC, the institution and make an interview with Coutinho, a series for the television. And so this is really nice, and that's why I also have some difficulty in thinking of this interview as a film because it wasn't really meant to be a film. It was an interview for television. It was supposed to be one of 5 interviews. We only had the time due to the the tragic death of Coutinho. We only had time to make one interview, and this was because SESC asked for a special event that they have for elder people, and they asked to show something about Coutinho during the interview. So we made the interview in a rush. Coutinho was like really was not liking to make this interview because we agreed to make the interview just just after his film was shot, the one you saw here, and if this in a way it's strange because the interview wants to be a film in a way because it's really strange. It was not edited. We didn't think of it as a film. It has 70 minutes because Jordana, who's the editor of Coutinho's editor, is also the editor of this interview. We had some difficulty in cutting Coutinho and his characters more. I mean, we wouldn't do what he himself wouldn't do. So it became a film. It was really strange. It's really strange to see it as a film. So I'll try to read something here. So every time I watch a Coutinho movie or even an interview like this one, my head is kind of visited by questions about the very nature of cinema, and I'm really talking about really essential, basic questions about cinema, like what is a movie? Even this interview makes me think, what is a movie? Because this is technically is a movie, but what can we consider a work, a movie, an author movie? What makes a movie a movie? What is it that connects sounds and images recursively? What patterns leave them sound and images recorded, not in the semiconductors, the chips and sensors, but in the mental screens. And what mechanisms make certain events of life, be them rehearsed or not, events like this one, any event, what make them kind of evaporate from the chronological flux of everyday life and get kind of recondensed as snow, but eternal snow in the film Olympus. What makes it? What does it? Yeah. And of course, these questions, they appear inside me in a much more urgent, much less pompous way that I'm using it to formulate here. This is natural because there's nothing in the Coutinian language that he would, nothing that the Coutinian language would despise more than the pomp itself in language. Not even the expression Coutinian he would bear, and let alone snow in the film Olympus or whatever. he wouldn't really. But Coutinho films are always about language itself. The language of cinema, of audiovisual in general, and the language of man. Even his trickster film, Joker film, the montage film, O Dia, Um Dia na Vida, is about language. It's different from every but it's about language. So it's always about language. So the interview that he gave me begins with a declaration of love to the expression caralho a quatro, and which is even in Portuguese difficult to understand, but I wouldn't translate it. But really, the popular language enchanted him. Impure, shallow, blatant, but expressive always. He was really this was his thing, in my opinion, and this passion was so radical in his life that, as he said, he spent the last 20 years of his life without writing a single line, simply because he believed he was unable to find the right words to express himself. He says in the interview that one of the great tragedies of mankind is that the thing is not the word anymore. And he, as we all said here, he was a reader of Walter Benjamin, and he was meaning that when he talks about the Adamic language, what he was saying is that, according to Benjamin, since Adam's fall, be it metaphoric or symbolic or real in a way, the words no longer transmitted what Benjamin called the spiritual essence of things. So if paradise was the unity before the fall is kind of the apartheid of word and thing. Language would be so corrupted now, according to this text that I read after Coutinho mentioned it in my film. Benjamin would call it the bourgeois language. That it only revealed itself, language, not the thing anymore. So what saved Coutinho, I think, from this kind of ideological dead end where he got by reading this thing, and he was like paralyzed by it. He was not writing, he was not trusting words anymore, was to understand that the human being, in addition of being like a kind of an intertwining of biological tissues, was also a weaved network of language, of linguistic threads. It was body and verb always in his movie. It's like the human fabric, the human textile was made indeed of text. So if the language only reveals itself, it also reveals the humanity of those who produce it, that language. So language language in a way is the humanity of those who produced it. So he was tuned to this kind of idea. He didn't have to read things to I think he probably I didn't know Coutinho. I wasn't a close friend of Coutinho as João or Escorel were, but I had the sense that for him reading was as important or as living. I mean, he had this idea by very organically. It was something that he wasn't. I didn't see him as a man of books. He was a man of life, and of course he read a lot, but he was a man of life. So he didn't have to read Wittgenstein or even more recent philosophers like Richard Rorty to be completely tuned with these ideas and to understand that language is not a separated internal mirror of life. It's actually what links us to life, and in a sense it's life itself. So I think this is kind of the redemptive thesis in what the stone where Coutinho founded the conversation cinema. Humanity is language. Language is humanity. Even if sign and sense are inexorably separated by the Adamic fall, as he said, Coutinho found over a very practical life of documentary making that it was through the words of the other people that he could express himself better about his own view of life. It was language what Coutinho was always after. I'm repeating here myself. He used to tell me, I remember, that he didn't want great stories or great facts. He wanted great narrators for his films. And it's funny to remember that in this process of listening to other people, he said, when I listen, I have to put myself between parentheses. All I am, all I know is not worth of anything. This is one of the many interesting paradoxes that he has, because I completely agree that he was a man full of I wouldn't say dogmas, but like very strong convictions, but he was ready in a millisecond, to change them completely and to accept what life brought. I really liked him in that sense because he was such a free artist. He was not a prisoner of his own ideas, and he was really. So it's funny, this parenthesis thing, because for him, which was a master of conversation, it was exactly a form of grammar restraint, the parenthesis, that made the word of the others flow. I have always found that there is something oddly kind of religious in Coutinho's approach to cinema. I know that he didn't like this word and this idea. Although when I mentioned, he was like, he kind of lit up. It was like his eyes kind of, for my surprise, was like bright when I mentioned the thing about the bell that rang, the priest thing, and he was like, it was like, huh? The priest thing, yeah, pristine. So it was oddly, strangely religious, and I think he believed that the verb was in the genesis of everything. That he kind of preached about listening to others, as he did in the movie. And it was in a professional, in a missionary way, in a way, not. He wasn't talking about life. He was talking about the thing that the work that he had to do in the world, and the body that speaks. He would No, I read it wrong here. He wanted a reconnection, and this reconnection should be done through the word. For him, what differentiates the right and the wrong word is the way it is narrated, and audiovisually, he wanted himself to narrate also in a fair and just way. He was only interested in the essential, the body that speaks, as he says. Nothing but a substantive body and the naked word in a way. Nothing but the physical here and a verbal now. This is why he said the present of filming is the only thing that interests me. And what I do is the purest cinema. This is quote from the interview. If someone gives me $10 million to shoot, I would kill myself, and I wouldn't know what to do. So this kind of vow of poverty, of film poverty, that is synthesized in this expression that Coutinho repeats, the prison that makes you free, also carried for me a strange Christian-like paradox, because kind of the cloister of the shooting, kind of powered by this body that speaks of a confessor in front of the camera, kind of was transformed into a vehicle, a medium that was bound to a paradise when he was really happy, but it was an earthly, even pedestrian paradise. It is important to say that this religiosity that I mentioned was neither mystical or theist. It was, on the contrary, a liturgy of a present and a living body that spoke the language of men, not the language of angels or whatever. And he wanted an earthly reconnection with what is most human, with what makes us humans, rational animals, which is always, again, the body and the language. This is what he wanted to relate to. So that's why he say that in fact these relations are erotic relations. He wanted to make clear that the visceral speech that he could, as no one else that I've seen, this is a mystery that we were talking about, this, how could he draw from the interview? I'm a documentary maker, such a bad interviewer, and I admired his talent. It's like, I don't know, Billie Holiday has a talent for singing. He has a talent for drawing because of his attention, because of the way he dealt with the boy that you showed, and because of what, I don't know. Really, the things that people would say for a documentary maker, it's like, what? It's always like something really. So when I kind of asked that, can you interview me for this? It wasn't, you have ideas for doing things before, and then, yeah, okay, so I'm gonna do that. I'm gonna propose. So let's, make the inversion again. And so when I asked, I said, my heart really started to beat very fast. I was really vulnerable. I felt really vulnerable and then I knew what he meant by the erotic relation, because I knew that what we were doing. Then this is what also shown that this, for me, is not a film that we want, 7 de Outubro, not in the Coutinho sense of what is a film, because both me and Coutinho, we were at a kind of a comfort zone. It was a great interview because of what he said. He was full of energy and everything. But it was not like in his movies that, something really strange happens and it is really erotic. It was really visceral. The verb would only, the verb that like the verbs that he got in his films would only leave the body of the person that was in front of the camera if the verb itself has another body to penetrate, a body that is willing to be penetrated, that is provocative, that is this is something strange about language and body again. It's really kind of a mysterious thing to me. I can talk about it and think about it, but it's really really powerful. So I was happy that he said that he couldn't interview people that he knew, because when I said, "Oh my God, what if he says he's going to interview? Am I gonna cry? Am I gonna say things that I never said even to myself in the mirror or whatever?" And so what will happen? I felt really vulnerable, and so.
Did you feel rejected?
By him? At that moment? No, I feel relieved. I really feel relieved. I didn't. He explained that, and it made sense. I don't know why I don't know why this only can happen between two people that don't know themselves. I don't know. Maybe it could happen between two people that knew themselves, just because of the presence of the camera, of the whole setting. But I was relieved in a way. I was really relieved. So this is another kind of another of the many paradoxes of his film. The fact that only people that are strangers to each other can have some sort of film intimacy, radical like this is. It's a really interesting paradox. But I wrote here that the cinema is founded on paradox. Even the polarity between light and darkness, the two opposites. The cinema is about paradoxes, I think, as many other forms of arts. So I remember that I saw a quote by Godard once that said that maybe in the future, well, actually, the quote said, the films maybe should be restricted to a person telling a story to the camera. And I could, they are so different, Godard and Coutinho. They couldn't be more different. One is like hyper documental, the other is like hyper fictional. They're very different. One is very synthetic, the other syncretic. And but Godard said that, and I don't know. I never asked. I forgot to ask Coutinho. It was in my list of questions, but I kind of threw it away once the interview started. If he knew this prophecy that he fulfilled, this prophecy, this boutade prophecy, as all the Godard prophecies, but it's strange thing that I started to tell. I'm sorry. I'm gonna finish it. As I started to tell that in the future, I remember the phrase as in the future, all films will be persons telling stories to the camera. Maybe my brain freely associated and mixes this phrase to that other phrase said by Einstein, that in the future wars will be fought with sticks and stones. My free association makes sense. This type of prophecy defines a meeting between the most original distant past and the most final distant future. Doing so, it points to an atemporal universal state, mythical state, which the poet Fernando Pessoa defined as the almost nothing that is almost everything. And this is, I think, is a perfect definition for the elegant beauty of Coutinho's work. His gesture is like suprematism in art, or bossa nova in pop music, as Malevich or João Gilberto, or as any of these unique historical art figures that repotentialize their own medium by being radically synthetic. Coutinho understood that to express an almost everything in his art, time had come to reduce his formal means to an almost nothing. And I think he's really as big as Malevich and João Gilberto. For cinema, his work is enormous. I mean, the courage that he had to make these films about it. Now it seems obvious. It's just but the courage that he had, it was gigantic. So, and this reduction is never a retention. In fact, it is a true redemption for all of us filmmakers. Coutinho sweeps away the dust rubble of phony images that is under the carpet of contemporary digital film production. And by doing so, he opens a way for a kind of a magic carpet flight, which is much lighter. I feel this because my work is very opposite to him in formal terms, and I feel liberated by his work. And also just to finish, I think he left a very concise body of work, and that has a narrative density that is unique in the history of filmmaking. So. Thank you.
I think Coutinho's work is something that I personally feel I'm still learning every time I see again, and every time I do something on my own work, I remember him and think about him, and I think it's an ongoing process of learning. And I thought a lot about him this year. One reason is because I was editing in a room next to the room where he used to work, and but the other reason was that if we really push his project, his aesthetic project, very far, editing itself becomes almost a necessary thing. I think his work was really something so in the quest of the essence of what's really important that everything around this became questionable. And so I'm going to try to say why this is how I feel. I'm just going to say impressions I have, because directors are the only people in a film crew that never work in other people's films. So we really never know exactly what happens. But plus directors have this tendency of always seeing things based on themselves, and there's no reason why I wouldn't be like this. But anyway, I always think that something very important for a film, an essential thing for film, is that the film can never win from its characters. The film cannot know more than its characters, cannot be ahead of them, cannot play tricks with them. When this happens, the first thing that happens then is that the film starts judging its characters. And I think the person who took this idea most radically and really did something important about this was Coutinho. I think he really succeeded in doing this in his films. And the way I think he got there, the way he managed to create the conditions for this to happen, was that everything was concentrated in the present moment. Because the only way you can really not be more than your characters is to be on equal terms with them, is in the present moment. So, for example, I think so how did he do that? I don't think there's a formula for that, but from everything I see, it seems like always prepared for this moment. So when we say, oh, it's a miracle, people open up, he knew how to listen, okay, this is all true. But I also think that cinematographically, he creates the conditions for this to happen. and in a very concrete way, in a very sophisticated way. The present moment is the only moment when you make a film where you can maybe be in equal terms with the people you're filming. It's always very easy to be smart, to know more in the air conditioning of the editing room, afterwards, with time, with distance. And it's always much easier to feel strong and smart when you're preparing the shoot, when everything is there for you. The only moment when you can maybe change this balance, which is a very delicate balance, is the moment of the shooting. And I think Coutinho really managed to do that. How? Because this is not easy either. It's not easy to create a balance when one person is behind the camera and the other is not. Like, I almost wanted to go back there to not be in front of the camera. I think he gave himself the conditions to, at that moment, be equal with his characters. And only because he was equal, that encounter was possible, with that level of sharing, of encounter. How to create these conditions? When I say being equal, I don't mean in human terms. Because in human terms, maybe it was completely the opposite. On the contrary, this was not the question. No, I don't think he knew anything about he didn't know much about the people he was going to interview. People didn't know much about him as people. But he created cinematographically the conditions for this balance and this being equal. How? By, for example, when he says, I never interview a person I know. Why would he? I wonder, why would he say that? I think it's a way of keeping the questions, keeping the curiosity completely genuine. To really want to ask those questions. And not ask those questions because this is necessary in an interview. Now, many people can do that. Me as a filmmaker, it happened to me that I didn't want to know certain things about the film I was making before those questions came up in the film, for example. So this is something that offers many possibilities. I think when I see him talking to Carlinhos and when I see the films, I recognize something that is giving yourself all the elements, all the tools to be fully present. Now, Coutinho was a person that was very annoying to meet when you were dealing with any kind of questions or issues, because he was a kind of very concrete person to talk to. He would come and say, but how many days? And how much this is going to cost? And he would really ask fully present questions, real questions, genuine questions. And so I think he gave himself the conditions when he was interviewing to always remain in this place. By remaining in this place, the encounter could not be different from fully there, fully happening. And they would be in equal terms. He would be in equal terms with the people he was interviewing. He would be saying, I think he's saying in the films, I'm not going to reconstruct this person's speech, and I'm not going to do this with my own speech. Because it's, again, something very tempting to do in the film. You can take out something you said that sounds silly, or you can arrange in a way that this person is going to see more this or more that. When I see the films, I recognize a desire of taking a whole piece. And by keeping this as a whole piece, you are giving this moment the maximum power. I hope this is not too abstract. Once you have answered this question, how can I be in equal terms with the people I'm filming? All the other questions that come with the filmmaking are answered. For example, another very important question when you make films, where am I going to put the camera? We always see all those ridiculous pictures of the directors doing like this, or looking in a viewfinder, because where am I going to put the camera is one of the central questions. Now, in this case, this question is very easy to answer because the camera is representing a relationship. So, where to put the camera, it's only an expression of this relationship. So, it's evident that the camera has to have the right distance. People often you see in films the camera goes here, goes there, it's there, because it's nice, because it's showing the place, it's showing on a different angle. I think in Coutinho's case it's very clear that the aesthetics is the ethics. So why move the camera? The more you don't move the camera, the stronger the relationship you're showing in your film is being shown. So the more effective the filmmaking tools are. Now it's interesting because Coutinho was often accused of not making cinema. This is not cinema. It's only people talking. But my opinion is that, on the contrary, it's cinema taking to its maximum possibility, is using the cinematographic conditions to really push the further away, you can, as far as possible, thank you, what can happen in that moment. And when you give the power to the moment, you're using cinema in its full potential. So for me, those interviews are like action films, because what happens when you say, okay, this moment, everything has to happen in this moment. This moment has to condense all the power that this relationship can express. You create a tension. You're creating cinematographic tension. What is cinematographic tension? Cinematographic tension is when you create a situation that, in my opinion again, that you could not predict, that is not obvious, but once it happens, it's an evidence. And when all the cards are played in one moment, and this moment has to answer all the expectation, you put in such an amount of tension in it that is the tension you can feel in the film. So when there's this question about, is it live? Film is live? What you're having there is a moment of life, a piece of life? No, I don't think it's life. It's much better than life, because it's a concentrate moment with a lot of tension. That is cinema. And that's why the films are people talking, but they're not chatty. What you feel when you're looking at the films is that every word is necessary. Because while he's doing that, while this encounter is happening, I'm sure he was processing a lot of things. I found myself in situations where I was interviewing and then the person says something. And I know if I don't react immediately, if I don't say something right and then, I'm deciding that I cannot use this in the film, because it would be awful to then keep the person in that, if the person said something absurd or something stupid, to keep the person in that situation and not do anything, not be there with the person and react to that, and do something else in the editing room and expose this person to some kind of ridiculous situation. So this is something we see all the time. You know, we see all the time in films that are reconstructing what people say and that are, I don't know, putting the director in a better place. But I think because Coutinho made the choice to not do that, he had no choice but to be fully present while the conversation was taking place. And by making this choice, he was allowing this cinematographic tension to take place. So other things he says, I think, go with that. I have to be vazio, I have to be empty, meaning I come open. What I'm saying here, I don't think it's only something that happens in documentary films. I think this can be the case in fiction too. And when I'm thinking about this, I come open. It's a way of coming almost naked. It's I often think that the actors, they get naked, but the director loses his own skin because you have to be open. You have to come ready for anything. And for me personally, for example, if I have to direct actors, I can only know what to say to them if I'm able to go emotionally to the same place where they have to go. If I'm there with them, then I know what to do. So it's a parallel with the situation of documentary films, of, for example, what we see in those conversations. Already? Tá, vou acabar. Okay. Let's just see if I didn't... So, okay, and all the rest for me go with that idea. When he's showing the preparation, paying the characters, arranging for the shoot, you know, all those things that come around the present moment, by showing them like this, it's only making more evident that the present moment is the moment that counts. The other thing is that this idea of creating structures, one building, one place, one day, it's another way of creating a certain kind of freedom for, again, putting the whole importance in the present moment, which is the moment of the encounter, the moment of the shoot. I think I saw Coutinho in difficult situations. For example, once in Paris, there was the Cinéma du Réel, which is a very important documentary film festival. He was showing Santo Forte. And in the same year, there was another film being showed called Fé. Both dealt with religion. It was the beginning of this series of Coutinho's films. Everybody was thinking Fé, which was black and white, with a lot of music and slow motion, was really a film. And Coutinho's film, all these people talking, was people were saying, "What is this?" So I'm just telling this to say that he's not using the obvious tools of filmmaking, but he's using deeply the tools of filmmaking for me. The last thing I want to say is I know that his last film, he wanted to make a film with children, and for reasons it was not possible. But I wonder, because children are the only people who live fully in the present. They don't have a story yet. Everything is happening now. And I wonder if this is not something that goes completely together with this whole ethic project. But I also hear him say that the experiences that were lived in the past and then narrated are much more powerful. So for me, it seems like his cinema is in between those two things. It's the tension between those two moments, which are kind of impossible to put together, but constantly navigating between them. Okay, thank you.
The call girl says to Coutinho, "You see what I am like? I'm a truthful liar, or a true liar. I think it condenses things in a brilliant way. The scene plays with the idea of the liar who can be trusted. It comes in a kind of mise en abîme, an interview within an interview, a form which 7 de Outubro unfolds with great sensitivity. The call girl herself as a character, the narration act itself, and also how much truth a lie can contain when it's spoken from a certain place, a certain position. I recall by association the title of a documentary about the Brazilian poet Manuel de Barros. The title is Only 10% is Lie. The poet disarticulates what is expected, and he says, only 10% is a lie, the rest is just invention. How does Eduardo Coutinho invent or unfold a form to rescue the strength and the vigor of the world with a camera? It's from Consuelo Lins. Carlos Nader's documentary allows us to approach something of that style. An interviewer in a point of inclusion, the voice, the body, the erotic presence due to proximity, the asymmetry of places, the craftsmanship, the crew, and their artifacts at site, as well as the rules that Coutinho imposes on himself regarding time and space. All the conditions of the prison, which fixes a structure that can then enable an incredible freedom, he says. The expression image of the drilling of the petroleum well is powerful. It inscribes the scene. That understanding of time and space also creates the conditions for its emergence. Speech can erupt, just a petroleum gushes out of the well, by this hole. In a filming of Edifício Master, Coutinho says something that causes a shock. Guiding his crew about the act of interviewing, he says, "Go deep into the wound." This impacts the spectator. I think about it, and now I see it. Go deep into the wound in the same way as it could be drill in the hole. Not from the viewpoint of hitting where it hurts, but in the idea that in that place speech can be produced. What he highlights, and that's my hypothesis, is that Coutinho opens a hole rich in resonance, questions which interpolates the interviewed. The ways he or she finds to deal with the questions in the temporal and discursive frame in which he or she lives. This resonates intensely with the emotional resumption of the narrative of Finding Nemo, which by means of the father-son relationship associates that story with the cross-generation temporal lullaby in that family. It is always in a certain relation to the thresholds that Walter Benjamin evokes the potency of the transmission of experience. Narrative, which is not the same as the one lived. With Lacan, we have something more in the drilling of the well conversation. It is always in the edge, in the borders of the whole of the real, of the impossible to say, that one produces something new. Trace, paint, or sing these edges, write, narrate, draw, photograph, film. Here the real means what does not fit in. That zone we cannot totally cover with images or words, which keeps coming back time and again. Rather than perfections or ideals, It is the rest that is always around that attracts Coutinho. In Peões, we hear, I miss it, but I wouldn't like it if my son became a peão. Impacted by what he said and emotional, he remains silent. The density of the time. Coutinho recounts 23 seconds of silence, and he said, I knew he was suffering, but I needed to know how the dude had gotten out of the hole. The practice of protecting and enduring that space is an ethical one. When to expect or intervene, also to be submitted to a certain loss. It's to preserve the bet on a certain resonance zone. There are no guarantees. It's a zone of risk. The interviewer is not exterior to this experience. He always pays a price for sustaining the edges, the borders. The image of the drill is also relevant from another angle. It is not about looking for the depth beneath a surface. Everything is a surface, Coutinho says. She says, preoccupied, I don't want to be stuck in the past. And he says, don't worry, past, present, it's all the same thing. In the same way he can ask, do you think you lived in Beethoven's German, man? And were you a queen in other life? The psychic reality is on equal footing with any event. Coutinho writes, I'm talking about what I perceive as real and what the others perceive as real as a springboard of associations and structures. It's in Milton Ohata's book. This subversion of the idea of surface versus depth is also in psychoanalysis the possibility of thinking a minimal structure of the subjective functioning. This is like the Möbius strip. A rectangular strip, its front, its back, two sides, joined at its end and twisted in the center. The twist changes the structure with paradoxal properties. The Möbius, turn, join. Now, on the entire surface, a single face, just one side. The right side, the wrong side, are both enclosed within each other. At the same time, in and out, or neither in nor out. The twist can be seen, for instance, in the assertion, I'm a true liar. Not simply a liar, nor simply telling the truth. Also, simultaneously, a maid and an Egyptian queen, because something from the previous life always remains, and it's smuggled into the new one. The Möbius structure's twist exceeds the either-or, as well as the unconscious formations arise in conscious discourse without crossing any edges. Lapses, forgetfulness, dreams come in the very own speech, and an intervention may arouse what bursts in as a fragment of desire or of an unconscious question. Perhaps the look-listen style in Coutinho arts is also in the twist, look-listen. Roland Barthes highlights that dreams are visual phenomena, and that through them one can perceive that which is original target to the ear, auditory imageries. He talks about Hans, Freud's phobic little patient. Hans said, I was afraid of the horse because it did a Krawall with his paws. In German, the Krawall is not only the disordered movement of the horse on the ground, but at the same time turmoil, uproar, words which condense visual and auditory images. It will be interesting in our context to remember that Freud called the unconscious the other sin. It has a sin also. What one sees along with what is addressed to one's ear. One more element of twist. It is and it is not about these people's very own lives. Coutinho enters the scene with a genuine interest in the other, but he also searches for what may arise there, in that meeting. It is a third terminology. It is with the other, but sustaining a certain void, taking into account what the device will contain of the creating narrative potency. In an analytical listening, the third terminology also matters in a sense which is not the oneself. It entails availability from the part of the patient with what comes in him from the other scene. Well, final associations, but I need the last page that remains there. Thank you very much. Oh, the other scene. Final associations, the microcosmic point, as Coutinho says, as a choice. Julio Cortázar writes in Valise de Cronópio of his impressions of great short story writers and photographers. He proposes that among them, the choice of the event or of the image lies in a sort of necessary condition. They feel the urge to choose and limit those events in a form which not only has value in and of itself, but is also capable of acting upon the spectator. The reader, in a sort of opening of its that project that beyond, from the small to the big one. Time and space condensed, he says, submitted to high pressure. And so does the movement of Walter Benjamin when he changes the structures of his biographical writings to fragments, privileged shortcuts which retains the extension of time in the intensity of a vibration, a lightning, finite miniatures of meaning, because the I is not uttered to remind one of oneself, but to give room for something else which is not oneself. Montaigne's essays also could form part of this dialogue. In his essay on experience, he departs from this accident, the stone he was thrown at, and from the sensation that runs through his body when he falls down. Then he opens up the questions about life and death, maintaining the narrative voice of the ordinary man without the pretense of universality. And what richness did he produce in our culture? Manifestations in art which zoom on something of the edge between the subject and the other, and harvest this incredible resonance body-word, I the other. When Coutinho ends the interview with the call girl, after she said, "I'm a true liar," the scene is over, he takes her hand, visibly happy. In 7 de Outubro, with Carlos Nader, Coutinho expresses the inestimable pleasure that he feels when the scene takes place, in a strong sense. Let's dare to think that this has to do with managing to touch, to capture in the documentary precisely that resonance, in scene, of what goes beyond oneself and finds an opening, and that today gets up to date as an addressing to us. Then, hopefully, we can host and make reverberate the living part of that heritage. Thank you.
Okay, I want to thank both Pedro and Bruno for their very kind invitation to have me be here today. I said yes to the invitation not because I'm an expert on Coutinho, I'm not, but because I suspected it would give me great pleasure to be here among friends, and already I've experienced this pleasure, so I thank both of you for allowing this. But because I'm not an expert on Coutinho, It's impossible for this scene not to have for me a slight character of fantasy or irreality, an air of improbability, of unpredictability, even an air of improvisation. But this experience of not knowing how to proceed, of not knowing where I'm going or whom will receive what I say or write, is often my point of departure, and I believe it was Coutinho's point of departure as well. Indeed, I nearly always have the sense that I'm advancing in the dark by habits, by instincts formed by habit, like a kind of animal. This seems all the more the case today, since having been invited to respond to these works, I haven't been sure how I might prepare at all. I also have to say that I feel a bit humbled in this room with so many of you who knew Coutinho. But in the end, I decided it might be best for me simply to think about the first question that was circulated by Pedro and Bruno. How do we make sense of the tension between chance, preparation, and empathy when documenting the lives of others? Especially since I feel that my being here before you in this context is a matter of chance, that I have not known how to prepare, and because of this, I need to ask for your empathy. But in order to return to this question, which I think has been touched upon by much of what already has been said today, I want to return to an instance that already is inscribed in the film we watched earlier this afternoon, in which Coutinho seems directly concerned with the interplay between chance, preparation, and empathy, and which stages an encounter between listening and seeing, which is pertinent to the questions Pedro and Bruno have asked us to consider today. Coutinho's exquisite 2007 film, Jogo de Cena. You'll all know the film, but I'll still rehearse, I don't know if it's called a plot. But before turning to the film, I actually wanted to accent 4 indices that I think have been already raised by the earlier speakers and that I think are inscribed within the comments that I'm going to make about this film. The first index is just the reference in the film that we saw this afternoon of the priest and the confession. Because I think that what's nice about what Coutinho does with that figure is that he makes clear that confession has nothing to do with the revelation of truth. Right? Because, for example, if you take St. Augustine's Confessions as a paradigm for all confessions, right? If you think that St. Augustine tells you what is true of all confession, then he tells you that confession has nothing to do with the revelation of truth because he's speaking to God, he's confessing to God, and God already knows everything. So he's not revealing anything to God. What's significant and important is the act of confession, right? It's like the police interrogation. Why don't you just confess? We all know you did it, right? So what's important is the act. What I think Coutinho is referring to is the need to tell a story. Okay? So the first index is that figure of confession. The second one is the reference to the figure of love in general, and not just the love that he expresses toward the characters in his film, and the love that he directs toward the characters more than to the actual people. He doesn't want to see them later, etc. He likes them more when they're characters in his film. Because also, I think that the experience of love, when you are first moved or touched or even kissed by someone, from that moment on, you bear the trace of that other in you, and you're no longer the same person you were before that encounter. Right, so that the experience of love suggests a kind of mutual dissolution of both parties. Right, there's a way in which each one gets deconstituted through the relation. I think that's important. The third figure, which is referenced, I think, throughout the films, and I think a number of people hinted at this too, is the figure of tears. There are tears in endless scenes in the films. And for me, the tear is something that's very significant. I mean, I very often ask my students to try and imagine what a politics based on the model of tears would look like, because when we think about acting politically in the world, we usually think about looking at a situation, evaluating it, and on the basis of that evaluation, deciding what to do. Right? But if you, so acting politically in the world is usually based on a model of vision. You look, you evaluate, and you decide how to act. But when you're crying, you can't see things clearly, right? So that a politics based on the model of the tear would begin in the presupposition that you always act with tears in your eyes, which is to say you always act without seeing things clearly. Also, when you're witnessing someone cry, what you're witnessing is that self dissolving, melting in front of you. So a politics based on the model of the tear would require a politics that reconceives the subject as someone who's fluid, melting, not stable or fixed. Also, the tear occurs between the frontier between the private and the public, right? It's usually the exteriorization of something internal into the public sphere, okay? So, confession, love, tears, and the last one, just citation, because I think that the figure of citation has come up in numerous instances. The glorious instance in the film is when you have the character saying, "I'll do it my way," right? Which is a total citation from the song that is playing at the same time. It's in Emerson's essay Fate, he says, "'Tis fine to say you elect your course as long as you accept an irresistible dictation." And I think there's the other, let's say, complementary passage from Emerson is in his essay Quotation and Originality, which not too many people read because they think of him as Mr. Self-Reliance. What people don't register as self-reliance itself, the essay, is 98% quotation. And it begins with an epigraph, "Do not seek yourself outside yourself," which is already a quotation. Right? So in the Quotation and Originality essay, he says, "All minds quote. Every moment is the warp and woof of the past and the present. We quote not only books, but tables, chairs, religions, customs. The originals are not original. There would be a history to the archangels if we but knew it." Right? So I think Coutinho's films are very very aware of the citationality of this. And actually one of the things that I liked about Tom's presentation is that, of course, he's presenting this compilation film that is entirely citational, right? So like the televisual arcades project, right? Benjamin. Okay, those are the four figures. You'll see them touched on in what I have to say about Jogo de Cena. But for those I think everybody knows the film, but just very telegraphically, everything begins in the film with an ad that is posted in a newspaper. If you are a woman and you live in Rio de Janeiro, you are over 18 years old and are interested in participating in a documentary film, please contact us, end quote. So a small selection is made from the 83 women that respond to the ad, and these women are filmed in the Teatro Glauce Rocha. Coutinho once said that the filming didn't take place in a theater, since the theater was empty, but in a theatrical situation. The women, professional actresses, less well-known actresses, and women sit in a chair with the empty theater behind them and tell the stories of their lives to the director. What becomes apparent, without being said explicitly, is that Coutinho has hired actresses to perform the same monologues produced by the original interviews. The same story is told twice, in other words, once by the person who lived it and a second time by an actress, without the viewer always being able to differentiate between the two, except in the instances when the better-known actresses would have been recognized by the film's Brazilian audiences, I imagine. Okay. In terms of what we see a face, a body, against the background of empty red chairs. You saw some of those scenes in the film that was screened earlier. This staging produces an inversion of roles, as if the viewer had become an actor, since the viewer occupies the space of the stage, and the actor a viewer, since the actor's view is that of the missing spectators. The actor and viewer find themselves back to back and face to face. This is one of the plays in the film's title, the spatial play between the stage and the empty chairs, and the play between reality and representation. The film has a kind of confessional feel to it. This is why I like the figure of confession that was raised. As one woman after another tells her story, and even when the actresses tell the story of others. We have the impression that the conversation is taking place for the first time, but we begin to register the repetitions in the stories the different women tell. What seems to get staged from one woman to the next is the capacity to present oneself as an other, to pass for another person and to be moved by the reality of another person, and this beyond any story we might tell of ourselves. It suggests that we always are and are not ourselves at the same time, that our stories are the stories of others, that our stories are never just ours, It is as if I am always outside of me, as if I am not I, but many others. What stands before the camera, a subject that gives way to a kind of portrait, does not exist before the filming. As Barth writes in Camera Lucida, once I feel myself observed by the lens, everything changes. I constitute myself in the process of posing. I instantaneously make another body for myself. I transform myself in advance into an image, end quote. This transformation raises questions about the possibility of empathy, about the difficulty of empathy with this person, this or that person, if this person presents himself or herself as an other, if he or she never speaks in her own voice. I think this is why he so favors the figure of the stranger, right? Why he doesn't want to know who's there. The generosity of that is he assumes that the other will always exceed his comprehension. Right? The film closes with Sarita, who has asked to be filmed a second time. You saw this scene in the film, because she felt the first recording was too heavy. She ends by singing a lullaby that used to be sung to her when she was a child, and that she used to sing to her daughter. In other words, like the actresses before her, she sings in the language of another. At the end, we have the sensation that we've seen many women, and at the same time, only one. Sarita is herself, and at the same time, all of the women, and none of them. What gets staged in the film is the play between what we see and what we hear, since it is by listening to the same story being told by different women that we come to understand what Coutinho finds so extraordinary in the subjects he films. As he puts it in the film we watched this afternoon, in reference to Santa Forte, what is extraordinary is the dialogue, the human voice, the body speaking, all of which are the origin of everything. In the words of Giorgio Agamben, the face is the only location of community, the only possible city, end quote. The beauty of Coutinho's films is that they offer us not only the faces of the people who live in his beloved cities and landscapes, but also the cities and landscapes that live in his subjects' faces. Each face we see, each voice we hear, presents a kind of archive to us, an archive that includes an entire network of historical traces, all of which have gone into the making of this or that life, but a life that, as his films always tell us, is never just one. Thank you.
And as I am the last one, I could say that I could speak for everybody in the name of everybody, but I could also say that I was one that, as I am the last one, that I have nothing to say because I was going to say all the beautiful things you had already said. That would be a good idea, no? But in order to avoid what would be a weak public exercise, a kind of immediate intelligence reacting to all of you, as the other discussants, I tried to prepare something, to prepare myself for something. But also because I'm not an expert, as Eduardo mentioned, I thought it would be better to act here and react as an anthropologist. But if Eduardo Escorel said that there is nothing new to say about Coutinho and he is an expert, what about my situation here? But then I thought, okay, let me play. I'm going to play a lot of things here as a metaphor of Coutinho. Let me play as an ethnographist, as a French ethnographist. But I'm not the first one. João was here before me, so that can be a problem. Also, I conclude that I took the wrong way. So I'm going to make something completely different. I have some notes here to prove that I really worked here, but it's not good. Why I failed? I failed because I thought that in the tradition of the French ethnologists, like Montaigne, with the essay of cannibals, like Rousseau, with the discourse public about the women, about the mankind, as Lévi-Strauss with mythologicals, I thought that I could talk about something like this. Coutinho's movie is something that, when you try to understand the other, The only way to understand the other is to transform yourself in a very strange person. This relationship, it would be seeing the other not as a stranger, makes you feel like a stranger. Montaigne says, either they are barbarians or I am. Rousseau says, they are not the good savages. I just need a good savage because I want to talk about civilization. And Lévi-Strauss says, what I'm doing here, if all of the men went to the forest and I stay here with women that do not want to talk with me. So I thought that would be a good idea. And to act again as an ethnologist and saying like Merleau-Ponty, ethnology is a science of the other, of being other, of playing the other. And maybe Coutinho is playing with the other. Then I saw Carlos' movie. And I saw Coutinho saying, I don't have this empathy, you know. I'm not at the end of the movies, I did not change. So I said, okay, I failed again. But maybe he is playing too, you know. So let me try to use another concept, two concepts. First of all, listening. Second, to be affected. There is an anthropologist, Favre Saada, that I like very much, that she says that listening is to be affected by the other, is to work not about, as you said, as Coutinho said, but working with, speak together, not having, as Lucia said, this external or internal frontier. Then I decided, just now, to play Coutinho. So I'm going to ask a lot of questions to the speakers and listen. I will try to be equal. Let's see if I can. No? So let me start with Carlos. Thank you, Carlos, for your beautiful cinema. Let's pretend it's a film, because you're going to say it's not. I'm going to act like this. Were you close enough to Coutinho when you filmed Coutinho? Could you feel your body together with his body? Okay. Second, did you have really an erotic relation with Coutinho? What about your body? Can you wait? Because I'm going to ask. Another question. Do you think that Coutinho, as Eduardo said, because I love this book, Eduardo's book about the photography, that when you have a camera, you always act. So do you think that Coutinho acted in front of you? So maybe I have a chance here, and he really believes that he can change, depending on the circumstance. He can change in front of a camera. And last question. Do you think he told you lies? Do you think that you lied too? But can I ask the other questions and then you answer? Sandra. I'm not equal, you see, I'm conducting here. Sandra gave us a beautiful speech, and as she's very humbled, she did not use her work. I really love, can I say Hungarian passport? That's the name of the movie. And I think, if you allow me, that you have strange connections with this. Maybe you can talk about this. Maybe you can act now. You can play the director, and I can play the person that wants to compare. You said that directors can see things always based on themselves. Do you think that, are you transformed when you play yourself and you see, for example, your grandmother? Or did you transform your grandmother in a stranger and you understood yourself better after the movie? I'm saying this because you always said that films directors never win, that characters win. I think you both won. And Coutinho won too. Other thing, a lot of people here talked about present. As an anthropologist, I'm always dealing with present. But as an historian, I always know that the present is full of past. Let's think about your movie. You have a lot of past in your movie. Oh, so how can you think about the idea of emptiness, but that the emptiness is really full of the past, of history. And to end, I think that some years ago, I was not here. João was invited to talk by Pedro, together with Aguinaldo Farias, to talk about delicacy. Now I'm asking João to see that but it's not like this. I think you have a language of delicacy. Can I say delicacy? Delicacy, together with Coutinho. I mean, a lot of details can make a big word. Okay. Lucia, let me play the psychoanalyst now. A true liar that directs me straight to the idea of fiction and non-fiction. So, how can you describe this idea? Who is lying there? No? Or if you think about lying, you have to think that you have a person telling the truth. Yesterday we saw a mathematician saying that he knows the truth. No, I guess Coutinho had no idea. So can you talk about truth and lies? Holes. What you have inside the hole? It's not the rosquinha of Fernando. Finding Nemo, no? Do you think that Sarah invented a Nemo for us? Is she telling the truth? And what's the truth as a psychoanalyst? Last question, Sandra. Time. You talked in a beautiful way about time. Do you think that the space of silence is also a space of time? No? Time, condensed time, past and present. I was going to ask Eduardo also about the concept of confession and the concept of interpellation, as Didi Fassin uses this concept. Because I think that as João answered the question, it was not an interpellation, it was a kind of, what's the difference? And Sandra, as you mentioned, the last movie, it would be about children's. And you also said that Coutinho is almost very much a very curious person. So do you think that there is something to do with this idea that a child is really a very curious person that have not so many layers between these different realities? Okay, I asked a lot of questions and I suggest you not to answer all of them. I tried to play Coutinho and I'm not Coutinho and I'm sure I failed again. As one anthropologist says, every anthropologist has his or her day of playing the fool. I guess I played the fool. To conclude, to end, I played the anthropologist affected by different languages. Psychoanalyst, movie, cinema, and this language of silence. Thank you very much.
So I think in the program it says 7 p.m., but it should say 7 a.m. We're going to have to be here for a long time. It's already so much. Thank you. I suggest that before we returning the word to the panelists, we keep collecting a few more questions and then send it back to them. I can't imagine that there is another event scheduled for this room on a Friday night, so we can run a bit late. So if anyone has questions, and yeah, I don't have to tell you, be succinct. You're the one who told me to tell people.
No, of course. Now I'm playing another role, so you need to tell me I shouldn't extend myself. Well, I have no words actually to thank you all for this wonderful panel, as much wonderful as the previous one. And I just wanted to add something and actually hear you guys about this, as Lily put it, silence as a sort of a concentrated or extended time, because this is a very, in the end, Augustinian question. I mean, the exactness of silence. I mean, what it tells you once you know how to hold, how to sustain it, which is probably the hardest thing, and it's the sort of dramatic thing about keeping those 23 seconds there all throughout time, so to speak. And then I wanted to hear you, and especially the filmmakers in this case, about this idea that, if I understood it correctly, Carlinhos, we could see perhaps Coutinho as a sort of cinematic João Gilberto, right? Because there is this, exactly what Sandra was saying, this sort of minimal, essential, ultimate minimal form where everything is being said with the minimum of means, of sensations even. And it's funny because this very minimal produces in the end the other scene to go to this kind of flipping the whole thing that the psychoanalysis somehow brings to us. And this is all about, I guess, revelation and rendering up. So there is, and it's funny because sometimes the critics, musical critics, refer to João Gilberto, enchanted as they are about by his music, as a sort of a saint. And it's, of course, it's not about a sort of a virtuous thing about being a saint, but it's sanctity in the sense of getting out something that is out of the ordinary. So I don't know, I want to hear you about this, thinking about religion, about, I mean, all the terms here are silence, sustaining silence, minimal forms, silence, and praying in the end. I mean, there is something that is reduced to meaning here, so I can't think of that without thinking about religion.
Get one more.
Thank you.
No, go ahead.
I'll be fast. Think about religion, all we talking from the pulpit there. But Carlos, it's a simple question. Why you maintain the scene of the man singing My Way? Because we know that this choice was one of the insistence of Coutinho in this film. Mm-hmm. Because the man wants to sing another song, and Coutinho insists in My Way, and you don't cut the scene. Yeah. It's all there in your film. And Lucia and Sandra, you mentioned in Signum Times this relationship between the present moment and the importance of this. And Lucia talks about the frame that allows the freedom. I like to hear you a little more about this, because I think that you mentioned one of the fundamental points of what we have discussing this afternoon. Thank you.
Regarding the João Gilberto thing, and I think in probably in every form of art, there's this figure, sometimes more than one time in the history of this particular art, that says, well, it's time to reduce it. It's there's too much things going on, and it's time to make some sort of essentializing, and I really think Coutinho is one of those figures, and as I think as big as for instance Malevich, or in what he did with he said, well, out of nothing he like kind of painted a black square and a white square, and he opened a world of new possibilities by doing that. And João Gilberto, the same. He influenced all the music, the popular Brazilian music, right? Well, almost a big part of the music. So I think Coutinho is of the same kind. And what he did, I mean, for a filmmaker, is really it's really big. It's like kind of I don't know if you have this expression here, the ovo de Colombo, the Columbus egg, or the very simple solution, but completely revolutionary. And I don't know. I'm not saying it was easy, but as he mentions in the beginning of the interview, 7 de Outubro, he says, well, now it seems easy, but and he told this to me also, when I made Santo Forte, everyone, including the audience at the Cinéma du Réel, kind of say, what is this? I mean, this is not going to happen. I mean, you have to cut like 40 minutes. Even the editor said that. And it was like really a really big thing. And when people started to understand that this worked, it's really taking cinema, as Sandra said, to its limit. And sometimes it's not. Sometimes it seems obvious. Or there's this Schopenhauer quote that says that, well, every new truth has three stages. The first one is to be ridiculized. The second one is to be combatida, fought with violence, and the third one is to be accepted as self-evident. And someone said also that the fourth one would be that the person who mostly ridiculized now says, "Well, I had this idea first. I'm also had." So I think Coutinho is as big as is really big. It's a pity that the language that is so important in his work is a language that is not understood. So his films doesn't travel as well as they should.
But it's not only about the Portuguese language.
I think it's very important that if it was English, Coutinho would be much bigger in terms of recognition. I mean, he's already recognized, but I think it's different to hear people talking and then to read subtitles. No? So it's I think this is important, and I think he's really an important art figure. I think people will see that in the history of art. I'm saying not maybe it sounds a bit exaggerated, but I really believe that. I forgot. Bom, no. No, he asked about what was it on? I didn't cut. I didn't cut. That's what was another thing about the movie. It's just like maybe the autonomy of the work of art is much radical than we think, because I really see this movie 7 de Outubro becoming a movie because he wanted to become a movie. So we started to edit. Let's make a 15-minute thing to be part of the 15-minute video to be part of the event, the elder people event. And then we couldn't cut Coutinho because he wouldn't cut people. Would we cut him? It's difficult to cut Coutinho because it's part of the experience of watching Coutinho. Time is part of the experience. It's not about images only. Time is very important in his work. So we couldn't cut not only this scene, but like everyone. How could I cut the without my way scene without the man at the end saying, "Wow, this is really emotional. It's been like 40 years, and I'm really this music." I wouldn't be able to cut. It was not a very rational process. It was like it didn't feel right to cut. Not only this scene, but others also.
How many hours of interview?
This was also I think Lily asked. Yeah, it was 5 hours almost. It was like 5. It was like 5 minutes. It was really like this. It was like a trance. He said he denied the film, the Jean Rouge thing, the film trance, but it was a film trance. We were like speaking, and he was speaking. I was mostly listening, and it was really incredible. So yeah.
Sorry, you said the present moment, but what do you wanna? You asked.
Because you mentioned at the beginning of your talk the quest of the sense, and you, I think that you try to differentiate this kind of a sense, and I think that is approximate that Carlos now talking about the simplicity of the things, not in a sense like a theological idea.
I think the what I wanted to say is that the present moment is maybe the only moment when you can rebalance the power relationship when you make a film, and try to deal with this in different terms, and who is looking at who, and you know the it's a mirror, jogo de espelhos, a mirror game, and this is the only moment where there's real danger, there's real possibility of looking for what's essential, and I think everything is concentrated in this moment. All the rest is helping this to happen, preserving certain things, curiosity, by allowing yourself to make real questions. I loved what Eduardo said about the face being the landscape. It's to really make the decisions of what's important and giving a real place for this. And you can only do, and then all the rest is gonna function with this. Why would you cut? It's interesting because we saw excerpts of older films where you see zoom, where you see inserts, you see things that you can see the evolution of the work. You can see how on every film those things became evidently too much, you know, unnecessary. And I'm gonna pass the microphone, but I want to suggest, because I know João has something that would be interesting for us to see. The something about the you're talking about real long shots. They were talking about.
Oh yeah, no, he has just
you forgot.
There's a small clip of 1 minute in which Coutinho talks about
long shots. So maybe this would be an interesting. Let's close maybe with this.
Yeah, I can show it again.
Great.
We can take it on the.
There's another one.
Okay. Thank you for the questions. Then, briefly, fiction and non-fiction in the truth. I can say that when we listen, the truth has the structure of fiction. Then that is the truth that we listen when we are in our work, in our what I was telling in the text. Fantasies are fictions, are forms to narrate the desire, and we don't have another form to do this que não seja by fictions. Then we have to have this obliquity with truth. We can say it straight. We have to make a transversal line, and this truth can be gained. Truth of the position of the person, the subject, not an essential truth. The whole, what's the whole of the rosquinha? the fact that the symbolic can cover the real. It's that symbolic with can cover the real with the words. It's always a whole, and we have to deal with this, with the questions of this arranging. If Sarah invented the Nemo to us, I think yes, she invented the Nemo to us, to her. She's affected with the question of the transmission, about the generations, and in that way she took Nemo, and it is with her. And it's not, it's interesting because we today are also about the question of the transmission. Then Nemo today for us is important. The frame, I think it's in the, I go in the same direction, the frame that gives freedom. Thinking about the fantasy, it gives a frame where we can talk and have a position, and then find a form to go with the desire and the positions and talking and everything. It's from this frame. It's not from anywhere. In time, I don't know if Pedro talk about time to me, or to or not. No, just the density of the time. The only thing.
You work within time in the sense that you work within the instant. If
Yeah.
Works, I mean, it's because you were there.
Yeah.
Only you.
Yeah, in the time, thinking of the Möbius strip is the only thing that can measure the rounds, the torsion. Only time is the element. It's interesting to think about the operation of listening in a session.
But there's something irresistible there, and that needs to be said, like the irresistible dictate.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
Needs to be said.
Mm-hmm.
I just want to say one more thing. It's you were saying, oh, it's like he's a saint. I don't know. It's true that I was listening to myself when I was speaking. I was thinking, wow, this is almost saying that this such a pure. We are talking about this and it's it's not. I don't. It's not this. No, it's on the contrary. I think it's a work full of edges and. I just want to make it clear. But when I say, when you really choose what's essential, when you really try to go towards what's essential, it doesn't mean you're better or you're. I just think that the power of the work comes also from that. And what does it mean to be? Are you lying? The things you were asking. Are you being yourself? Are you representing? Are you? Everybody is constantly playing as we are here. Of course, the camera gives a special place for this. And I think in the work, I suppose, I cannot affirm, but I suppose, as probably all directors at some point do, Coutinho is not only directing the interviewer, the person he's directing everybody. He's directing himself. He's directing. When you make a film, you're a director all the time. Since the first phone call, you are creating conditions. So you're always playing a part. And the question is what kind of part. And when I talk about the present moment, I think it's a moment when the equation between the power between the different parts can be really questioned or not. And in this case, I think it was. But everybody is always playing a part, and nobody is more pure, more saint, or more. This is all these are the elements of the filmmaking, and it's so interesting for me and so impressive the way he dealt with this.
Okay, I'll be very telegraphic in some way, but I'm going to pick up some of the threads of some of the earlier questions because I think they'll help me get to the question of interpolation. The first one is just this idea of the present being full of the past. I think that this is absolutely true. I think this is what I was evoking with the Emerson when he says that every moment is the warp and woof of the past and the present. But I think that's how one can gloss Coutinho's line that the past and the present are the same. Right, I mean, he doesn't distinguish them. The present is full of time and full of the past. This is also why when you have the characters in the film present, I would say that when they speak, their voices are full of the voices of others, right, which is going to be on the direction toward helping me get to the question of interpolation. I do like this figure of the true liar very much, and I don't know if I don't think Lily knows this, but I used to, I began in mathematics. I used to do probability risk assessments for nuclear plants. And the great thing about starting out in mathematics is that all the jokes come from that side about who's more imaginative. Right? So David Hilbert, early 20th century non-Euclidean geometrician, one of his students is supposed to have one of his colleagues is supposed to have gone up to him and said, well, did you know that your student so-and-so has quit mathematics to go write novels? And he's supposed to have said, it's just as well. He didn't have the imagination to become a first-rate mathematician. So there is this sense that within the world of mathematics, the great mathematicians already know about the role and place of the imagination within mathematics. In terms of the issue of confession, interpolation, I mean, I think I did say something about confession, that my model for confession suggests that confession has nothing to do with the revelation of truth. In fact, it has more to do not only with presenting a fiction, but also it has something to do with revealing something about yourself, but not necessarily a truth about yourself. The great sort of example of this, other than St. Augustine, is the film, actually, The Ruling Class, the old film with Peter O'Toole. You remember this great film. Like in the first half of the film, Peter O'Toole thinks he's Christ. And in the second half of the film, he thinks he's Jack the Ripper. Right? So at one point, the wealthy family, he's wealthy, the family wants to institutionalize him so that they can get his money, declare him crazy. So the analyst comes to ask him why he thinks he's Christ. They find him in the living room hanging up on a crucifix, but he comes down. They ask him why he thinks he's Christ, and he simply says, because I find that when I'm praying, I'm talking to myself. Okay. So this question, though, of interpolation for me is I think that the best way for me to go to that question is also to go back to the film, the sort of great film that Tom brought up, which I would argue is not an eccentric film in the corpus, but is in fact a film that tells us what is true of all his films, right? Which is to say that it's a film that confirms our relation to the media. It confirms that the media are constitutive of our identity. So it's not that there are events and persons that can get filmed, or are recorded by the media, but in fact that the media help create those events and persons. And I think that that's something that is evident in the films if you look at them. But also the interpolation issue comes up because I think all those little clips that get put into that film are the mediatic cultural resources that his subjects ventriloquize in the interviews, right? So I would actually argue that eccentric film is actually the film that gives you the clue and key to how to read all the other films. Just as a PS, I think that silence is entirely capable of speaking. Right, and that pure silence never exists. It's not possible. Okay. Although I will now shut up.
Also, that's a good note to end from one Eduardo to the other Eduardo. we'll give Coutinho the last word, and João will give the context of this very short clip.
Yeah, this is one of the last scenes that were ever shot of Coutinho. I think this is a couple of, not weeks, but at least not many months after that he died. Just a context, Coutinho started as a fiction filmmaker, and then there was the coup in '64, and he went to work first in newspaper and then in television. And he used to do those documentaries for, I don't know, animals and the heart and the blood system. And once in a while he was able to do something about Brazil. And in '76 he made a film about the drought in the Northeast. And as he was speaking to 3 or 4 people who were affected by the drought, one of them started to speak about the things they had to eat in no sertão during the drought. And it's an incredible scene. It takes about 3 minutes, I think, 3 minutes and a half. And he describes roots, unedible roots, and this is what the family eats. This is not the scene I'm showing to you, although it's here somewhere. But it's from this scene, the fact that it was shown on television and it lasted 3 minutes and something, that's when Coutinho discovered that he wanted to be a documentary filmmaker. The duration of the scene, the fact that things happen in the scene itself and not between scenes as a product of editing, was the spark that told Coutinho that he would become a documentary filmmaker. And he never veered from that decision since. So this scene is very important because of its duration. And so duration is very important for Coutinho, and his whole body of work, of which we spoke today here, is a consequence of video. It could never exist before the invention of video. And Santo Forte, his first film of this new, which started his new life as a documentary filmmaker, is a film made in video at a time where no one wanted to shoot in video because it was seen as less than film. And he was the first one to decide that film doesn't interest me anymore because you have to cut every 10 minutes or even less than that. And with video you can just shoot and shoot and shoot, and things happen in the shooting. You don't have to interrupt. So this is a very brief scene, and it was not shot by me. It was shot by a filmmaker who was making a film with Coutinho. And this is, as you will see, it's just he's waiting to be called to be filmed. And there's a very informal conversation, and at some point he talks about how precious raw footage is, and how when you veer from the raw footage, the film gets worse and worse and worse. So the best film is just to see the raw footage and not to edit, to come back to what Sandra said when she was here. Editing destroys raw footage and makes, that's why the film is always, he used to say that the film is always less than the raw footage. And this is basically what he's saying here in about a minute and a half. So this is it.
Então aquela loucura, quando um cara tem um plano de 26 segundos e que tem, de repente, uma galinha passa na carroça, não sei o quê, e o cara por razões de televisão ou por não sei o quê, fica 8 segundos, porra. Acabou com aquele próximo, né? Para fazer aquele plano chinês, plano chinês, sabe por quê? Aquilo é especial, pô. E você, naquele negócio de airport, não sei o quê, de repente, bomba.
That's him.